During World War II in the Pacific, Admiral Chester W. Nimitz, known for his strategic mind, was meticulously scrutinizing naval charts in the tension-filled war room. A young lieutenant enthusiastically presented what he claimed were the latest charts. After examining them, Nimitz questioned, "Son, are you sure these are updated? They look exactly like the ones from last week." Realizing his mistake, the lieutenant, turning slightly pale, was flustered. Nimitz, maintaining a straight face, then joked, "Does this mean we've been circling the same island for a week now, thinking it was 3 different ones?" The room, initially tense, burst into laughter. Nimitz added with a chuckle, "Let's make sure our ships aren't just sailing in circles, gentlemen. If we keep this up, we might accidentally discover Atlantis instead of the enemy." One morning, as Admiral Nimitz was walking through the bustling corridors of Pearl Harbor, he decided to grab a cup of coffee from the officers' mess. He poured himself a cup and took a sip, but his face immediately contorted into a look of surprise and mild disgust. The coffee was absolutely terrible. Determined to get to the bottom of this, Nimitz called over the officer in charge of the mess and asked, "Who made this coffee?" A young, nervous ensign stepped forward and saluted. "Sir, I did. Is there something wrong with it?" Nimitz looked at the ensign, then back at his cup, and said with a straight face, "Ensign, if this coffee was any stronger, I'd have to start saluting it." The young ensign, still nervous but trying to maintain his composure, replied, "Sir, I was just trying to give you a taste of the fleet's fighting spirit. In a cup." One sunny afternoon aboard the USS Missouri, Admiral Chester W. Nimitz was conducting an inspection. "How's the cleaning going?" he asked. The sailor answered, "Admiral, it's like trying to keep a cat dry during a rainstorm. Futile, but necessary." Nimitz couldn't help but laugh out loud. "Well, if you can clean a deck as well as you tell a joke, I think we'll be just fine." Nimitz moved on. In the engine room, he saw a young sailor diligently working on the machinery. "Son, what's the situation down here?" Nimitz inquired. The sailor replied, "Well, Admiral, this engine is like my mother-in-law. It makes a lot of noise, heats up quickly, and you never know when it's going to break down." Trying to keep a straight face, Nimitz said, "Well, let's hope your in-laws don't find out you compared them to a broken engine. Carry on." One morning, Admiral Raymond Spruance was inspecting the USS Enterprise crew. Seeing a young sailor nervously adjusting the radio antenna, he approached and asked, "Sailor, what seems to be the problem here?" Startled, the sailor saluted and replied, "Sir, just trying to make sure we get the best signal, sir." Spruance, observing the frantic adjustments, asked, "When was the last time we received a clear transmission?" The sailor responded, "Sir, about an hour ago, sir." Spruance pointed to a seagull perched on the antenna and asked, "Then can you explain why our feathered friend here looks more relaxed than you?" The sailor glanced at the seagull and retorted, "Sir, I guess he trusts our signal is strong enough to not worry about the Japanese intercepting it." Struggling to keep a straight face, Spruance chuckled and said, "Well, make sure he pays his radio bill on time next month. We can't afford any interruptions." During World War II, Admiral Chester W. Nimitz found an enlisted sailor intensely typing at a typewriter, surrounded by mountains of paper. Curious, Nimitz approached and asked, "Son, what in the world are you working on with such dedication?" The sailor stood up, saluted, and replied, "Sir, I'm writing a new manual on naval strategy." Intrigued, Nimitz asked, "Oh really? And what groundbreaking strategy are you devising?" Puffing up his chest, the sailor proudly declared, "It's called the submarine screen door strategy, sir." Trying to stay serious, Nimitz played along. "How does this strategy work?" With a straight face, the sailor said, "It's easy, Admiral. We put screen doors on submarines. If enemies flood us, we close them, and the water goes right through." After a stunned pause, Admiral Nimitz regained his composure and replied, "Well, son, that's certainly one way to keep the fish out. Make sure to include a chapter on waterproof paper for when we take notes underwater." In the midst of planning a vital Pacific battle, Admiral Chester Nimitz visited his flagship to lift spirits and check on preparations. Upon entering the bridge, he saw a nervous ensign eyeing a mop bucket near Nimitz's usual spot. Before the ensign could utter a warning, Nimitz took a step closer, accidentally kicking the bucket, sending soapy water cascading over the polished floor. Trying to maintain his dignity, the Admiral slid across the deck with an unintended grace, miraculously keeping his balance. The ensign, mortified, saluted stiffly and exclaimed, "Sir, I was just about to report that we've discovered a new method of ship propulsion." Without missing a beat, Nimitz, standing tall despite the soapy debacle, replied with a twinkle in his eye, "Excellent initiative, sailor. But let's stick to traditional methods for now. I prefer my sea battles a bit less slippery." During the Battle of Leyte Gulf in World War II, Admiral Halsey received an urgent but perplexing message from Admiral Nimitz concerning the whereabouts of Task Force 34, which concluded with, "Where is Task Force 34? The world wonders." Surprised, Halsey turned to his communications officer and exclaimed, "The world wonders, huh? That Nimitz has got some nerve." The officer quipped back, "Maybe it's Admiral Nimitz's strategy to confuse the enemy, sir. If we don't know where we are, the Japanese certainly can't find out." Laughing at the absurdity, Halsey drafted a cheeky reply, "Currently stationed in the Sea of Confusion, surrounded by the Isles of Miscommunication. Recommend sending a search party led by common sense. No wonder the world wonders." Upon receiving the message, Nimitz chuckled and remarked, "Well, it seems our secret code is so good. Even we can't understand it." One day, during a particularly intense strategy meeting, the officers were discussing various complex maneuvers. The atmosphere was tense as they deliberated on the best course of action. Suddenly, a young lieutenant burst into the room, looking flustered. "Admiral Nimitz, sir, we have a serious problem," he exclaimed. Nimitz looked up from the map calmly and asked, "What seems to be the issue, Lieutenant?" The young officer stammered, "Sir, one of our submarines has gone missing. We can't find it anywhere." Nimitz raised an eyebrow and said, "Missing, you say? Have you tried looking underwater?" The room fell silent for a moment, and then everyone burst into laughter. The tension melted away. With a twinkle in his eye, Nimitz leaned in closer and added, "But Lieutenant, if it has legs and is out for a walk, I suggest we prepare for a very interesting report." As the Battle of Midway raged, Admiral Spruance stood on the deck of his flagship, peering through binoculars with unflappable calm. Around him, aides scrambled to deliver updates. Suddenly, a young ensign, breathless from running, approached the Admiral. "Sir, we've spotted the Japanese fleet on the horizon," he exclaimed, handing over a slip of paper. Spruance took the note, glanced at it briefly, and then looked back at the ensign with a slight grin. "Are you sure this is the enemy, Ensign? Because according to this, you've just spotted the largest school of tuna in the Pacific." The ensign, puzzled, took another look at the paper and blushed. "Apologies, sir. Wrong report. The enemy is a bit further to the left." "Well, let's hope they're not as slippery as those tuna," Spruance quipped, turning back to his binoculars. "Keep the reports coming. And next time, make sure it's the enemy, not lunch."